Natural gas is best known as a fuel for things like heaters, stoves, and power plants. But it's not just a source of energy. It's also a raw material for all sorts of everyday products. Things like detergent, polyester fabric, and fertilizer all come from chemicals derived from natural gas. And one of the most important petrochemical products today is plastic. Global plastic production grew tenfold between 1970 and 2015. And the World Economic Forum says it will almost quadruple by 2050.
Plastics are made from gas and oil, so the plastic industry is the fossil fuel industry.
The rise of fracking in the U.S. has led to an abundance of natural gas and its byproducts, fueling the growth of domestic plastic production.
Most food packaging is polyethylene, and polyethylene comes from ethane, which was originally a waste product of the fracking process.
U.S. ethane production has climbed steadily since 2013, reaching a record high in 2023.
The petrochemical industry found that they could turn this waste gas into a new product in the form of single-use plastics.
In fact, since 2010, gas-linked U.S. plastic and chemical projects have attracted more than $200 billion in investment, according to the American Chemistry Council and Industry Group.
And so now we're seeing a build-out of plastic production infrastructure.
But that build-out is not without its costs. At every step of the plastic production process, from fracking to petrochemical processing and beyond, there's potential for pollution. In a 2021 report, advocacy group Beyond Plastics estimated annual greenhouse gas emissions from the entire plastic supply chain.
And what we found was that plastic in the U.S. is on track to outpace coal emissions by the end of this decade. 90% of the emissions of plastic production are released into just 18 communities. And these communities are almost always communities of color and/or they're low-income communities.
In addition to greenhouse gases, plastic manufacturers emit hazardous air pollutants linked to health impacts, such as nervous system problems, reproductive problems, and even cancer, according to the Center for International Environmental Law.
So there's an inequality at play here where it's somehow acceptable for some communities to be burdened with the pollution.
Emissions aren't the only pollution concern when it comes to the petrochemical plants that make plastic. There's also their end product, tiny plastic pellets known to some as nurdles.
Nurdles are lentil-sized pieces of plastic that then are shipped to another facility to be made into actual plastic products.
It's estimated that 230,000 metric tons of nurdles enter the waterways every year.
Nurdles are like glitter. They just get everywhere.
The pellets have been called toxic sponges for their ability to absorb and spread harmful pollutants and bacteria. And nurdle pollution can harm wildlife. Birds, fish, and sea turtles have all been known to eat nurdles, mistaking them for a natural food source. If they eat enough pellets, these animals can feel full without actually being nourished, eventually leading to starvation.
Pellets.
Diane Wilson, a retired fourth-generation fisherwoman turned environmental activist, lives near one of the largest plastic plants in the country, Formosa Plastics in Point Comfort, Texas. In 2017, she led a lawsuit against the company over their pellet discharges, gathering evidence to support her case.
I bought this old used kayak for about $70 and I put it in the water, and I literally started trying to track down their discharges. This was a part of our gathering of evidence at Formosa's, at their stormwater outfalls, and at the industrial wastewater out of Lavaca, Matagorda Bay. I started seeing all the pellets and all the powder that was coming out. There are pellets all over this area here. And me and a handful of workers, we went out every single day and checked probably a 20-mile area around the beaches, around the inlets, around the boat ramps, and I kayaked into the outfalls, and we collected over 2,500 samples.
She argued that the pellets could harm the local wildlife and, in turn, the local fishing, shrimping, and oystering communities that rely on that wildlife for their livelihoods. The federal judge overseeing the case agreed, ruling in her favor.
The federal judge said that the violations were enormous, that Formosa was a persistent violator.
Formosa settled the lawsuit in 2019, agreeing to pay $50 million into a trust establishing a local fishing cooperative, as well as supporting environmental projects and research. The company also committed to zero discharge of plastics in the environment. Wilson won the 2023 Goldman Environmental Prize for her work. Today, she continues to survey local waters and adjacent vegetation for nurdles.
Thousands of them.
Without the dedication of activists like Wilson, who spent years documenting nurdles at one single plant, it can be tricky to figure out where nurdles are coming from and who is responsible for cleaning them up. Marine biologist Jace Tunnell set out to help solve this problem with a citizen science effort called Nurdle Patrol.
We have volunteers going out and looking for how many pellets they can find in 10 minutes. So we're going to do a survey today to see how many we can find in a 10-minute period. Okay, here's a nurdle. Another nurdle here. We're not trying to pick all of this up. We're really trying to get an indication of where the problem areas are.
Nurdle Patrol began in 2018 as a Facebook group. Now it's in its 5th year, with more than 9,000 volunteers who've conducted roughly 20,000 surveys.
People can go out. They can do a 10-minute survey looking for how many plastic pellets they find at their local beach, river, or lake shoreline. They can include that data into this database, and it shows up on a map. We want to be able to find, where these high concentrations are so that we can try to make policy and change on how these companies are handling these plastic pellets.
Approaches to solving the pellet problem vary. There are industry-led, voluntary programs to reduce pellet loss, as well as proposals to strengthen regulations around pellet discharge on the federal and state levels. Then there's the more fundamental solution of reducing overall plastic production in the U.S., which would not only tackle pellet loss, but also pollution along the entire supply chain, including the extraction and processing of natural gas.
Pretty much anything that is a single-use plastic didn't exist 50 years ago. And there are alternatives out there that we can go back to. The first one on the list is reuse and refill infrastructure. We need to make less plastic. We need to stop the practice of extracting oil and gas if we want to have a livable planet. And I know that sounds extreme, but that is what the science is telling us. And we have to reckon with reality here. We have alternatives to plastic. We have alternatives to fossil fuels. What matters is the political will to get it done. And that starts with the grassroots. Community opposition is really where this fight is happening right now.